When I was still in high school, I used to play World of Warcraft. I'm a female, and it's not a game you'd expect a girl to typically be interested in, but I was a bit of an outlier. Now, I didn't know anyone who would play the game with me in real life. My friends at school didn't want to get a subscription, and they didn't have time, which meant that I had to find a raid group online. I found a raid group by meeting a player named Thompson. I played a healer role, and they needed healers, so I was accepted quite easily. It was a small group, not enough for a raid yet, but enough to do other quests. Without getting too much into the details of the game itself, most of the players when I played with them were nice and kind to me. Now, I can't recall exactly the gender of each group member, but I'm pretty sure most were guys. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why I stood out, since they knew I was a girl. This wasn't a problem. I was just happy to play with them, and besides, from the light teasing, they treated me the same. Thompson, however, was different. He was very affectionate to me, and often gave me gold and in-game items to me via mail, because according to him, I was doing such a good job as a healer. I was young at the time, so I had mixed feelings about it, but I assumed the best intentions in him. However, one day, I was casually talking with the group, including Thompson. We discussed what state we lived in. Coincidentally, Thompson lived just a state over from me, but he used to live in my state before moving to where he was. I suppose I developed a sense of trust in Thompson, since he seemed friendly and he lived in my state, so for some reason, I rationalized a sense of trust for him. He asked me where I lived, saying he wanted to know if we used to live nearby. I gave him my general area, but not a specific address. He then asked me if I had any social media, like Facebook or Twitter. I told him I didn't really want to share that with him, and he didn't seem to push further, so I thought nothing much of it. One day, I think it was a few days before Valentine's Day, Thompson confessed to me in a private message, saying he developed feelings for me. Now, I didn't know this guy. I didn't know how old he was. I didn't see him that way, so I politely rejected him in private conversation. Despite my rejection, Thompson was still trying to get close to me by giving me gold and items as he did before. With the context of the confession, I felt like he was intruding on my personal space, and I told him to stop. Despite me telling him to stop, he didn't, so I just left the group and blocked him from my friends list. A few days later, I had a message on my Facebook from a guy named Toby Gibson asking me if I was okay. I knew this was Thompson, but I don't know how he found my Facebook, despite me not giving it to him. However, I suspect he found it, since I used my first name as a username. I didn't expect he could find me with that info alone, but I realized he also knew my state and general area, so it was most likely he was searching for me with this specific information. I blocked him and didn't bother with him much. I was creeped out a lot, but I tried to keep my cool. I took a break from the game and the online world for a while, and nothing really happened for a good few weeks. That is, until one day during the middle of the night, I saw a van sitting outside my house. I had never seen the van before, but it looked like there was someone sitting inside. Eventually, I saw a man get out and walk over to one of my neighbor's house and knock on the door. I saw him knock on 2 of my neighbor's doors, but no one answered, but the third one did. I don't know what they were discussing, but I noticed my neighbor glance up at my house, and then the man turned around to look in my direction. Shortly after this, my house phone rang and my dad picked it up. Turns out, the guy in the van was looking for someone with my name. Immediately, I had a suspicion on who he was. I told my dad to call the cops as I genuinely felt threatened by this guy. My dad wasn't happy, but he did as I said. But after that, Thompson came up to my door. I hid from sight and asked my dad to tell him to go away. He answered the door for me, and my dad said there was no one by my name in this house. After a while, I heard the door close and he went away. He didn't say much, but according to my dad, he had a bunch of flowers in his hand. My dad wanted to rip his head off, as the man looked to be about 40 years old, but he knew the police would be here soon. The cops eventually came, and Thompson was questioned for his suspicious actions, especially with me being underage. He was apprehended, but he told the police that he didn't know I was underage. He just said he knew me from gaming and wanted to bring me flowers and ask me out on a date. I don't know what happened to Thompson after that. I never heard from him again, and the friends from my World of Warcraft group say they haven't seen him online since. Creepy thing is, I told Thompson I was only 14, and he still pursued to track me down. I moved to a small town in Iowa just over a year ago. There wasn't a lot to do, but I always felt safe. It was the kind of place where neighbors watched out for each other. That's what I thought, anyway. Because I was working from home, I didn't have a chance to make many friends. My neighbors were okay, but they were all busy with their families. About a month after moving there, I joined a gym. I needed the exercise, but I also figured it would be a good place to meet people my age. And I was right. I met this guy named Nathan, and we seemed to hit it off. We ended up going to a coffee shop after the gym and talked for a bit. Slowly, I realized that there was something weird about Nathan. I'd only known him for a couple hours, and he was already talking about taking me on his next vacation to Europe. I thought he was joking at first, so I laughed, but that made him angry. I ended up paying for both our drinks and then hurried out of there. The next time I went to the gym, Nathan tried to talk to me again, but I told him that I'd rather work out by myself. He said he understood and left me alone. I thought that things would go back to normal, but then I noticed him staring at me at the supermarket, and when I drove to the dentist, I saw that his Nissan was following me. I told myself that these were just coincidences. This was a small town after all. People run into each other all the time. But then one night, I was watching TV by myself when I heard a noise in my backyard. It sounded like someone was sneaking around. I turned on the porch lights, but I didn't see anyone. Then I went to the front door and saw that Nathan's car was parked across the street. That's when I knew that he was stalking me. I didn't call the police because I didn't want to escalate things. I ended up calling my sister back in California to ask her what to do. She told me to get out of there immediately. I told her she was overreacting. Still, I made sure that all the windows were shut and the doors were locked. When I looked back at the street, Nathan's car was gone. For a week, I didn't see Nathan again. He stopped going to our gym. I was still on edge, but I assumed that he'd moved on to someone else. Eventually, I met another guy named Rick who seemed really nice. He was the exact opposite of Nathan. Fun, but a little aloof. He invited me to his place for dinner, and I accepted. His house was just a few streets over. I walked there and he let me inside. The place was really neat and comfortable. He made us lasagna, which was amazing, and we talked for a while. I excused myself to use the bathroom, and he told me where to go. I guess I heard him wrong, because I ended up walking into a bedroom. I was about to leave when I noticed that one of the walls was completely covered by photos. I switched on the light and saw that they were photos of me. Me in the shower, me in my car, me watering my lawn. This was some sort of shrine. Chills ran down my back, and I quickly left the room. Rick was standing behind me in the hallway. He was so close that I accidentally collided with him. "Wrong door," he said. "That's my brother's room." "You live with your brother?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "You'll meet him. He should be coming home soon." Before I could say anything, I heard the front door creak open. "Hey, I'm home!" I recognized Nathan's voice. "I have to get out of here," I told Rick. I raced across the house and ran to the sliding door in the back. I couldn't go out the front because Nathan would see me. I tried to pull the door open, but it was stuck. "That's not the exit," Nathan said. I turned around and saw Rick and Nathan standing together. They were both smiling at me. "Rick, I've had a great time, but I really need to go." I tried to get around them, but Rick blocked me. "Not yet," he said. "My brothers told me so much about you. We were both hoping to get to know you a little better." I realized that Rick was in on it too. Nathan was my stalker, and he'd gotten Rick to help lure me to their house. They were both insane. I tried to push through them, but they grabbed me from either side and pulled me back to the dinner table. Nathan shoved me down onto the chair. "We didn't finish our meal," Rick said. "I worked hard on it." "Please," I said. "I don't want any trouble." Nathan started stroking my hair. Rick just stared at me, smiling. "She smells nice," Nathan said. "I know," Rick agreed. He saw the knife and fork sitting on the table in front of me, and he slid them out of reach. He didn't want me to have any weapons. I sat there, horrified, as the two brothers made plans for our future. They said that the three of us would fly to Europe. We'd rent bicycles in Amsterdam and take a cruise down the Danube, and the whole time, Nathan kept stroking my hair. When they were finished, Rick turned toward me and said, "Well, doesn't that sound wonderful?" I was too scared to answer. I needed to fight back, but I didn't know how. All I had was the half-eaten tray of lasagna in front of me. Before I realized what I was doing, I picked up the tray and slammed it into Nathan's face. Lasagna flew everywhere. Then I jumped out of my chair, grabbed the fork from Rick's hand, and slammed it into his arm. That gave me enough time to run out of there. I raced all the way back home and called the police. The brothers were arrested, and the next day I told my landlord that I wanted to end my lease. I moved back to California right away, and I never looked back. I'm done living in small towns. Back in October, I started dating this great guy named Vinny. He was sweet and loving, and we hit it off instantly. He was handsome and very rich. He constantly spoiled me with all kinds of expensive presents, jewelry, clothes, a new car. The only problem was that he was always working. I assumed that all of the lavish presents were his way of apologizing for all the time he spent in the office. It was a bit frustrating because I really wanted to see him, but I understood that he was under a lot of pressure. A few months ago, he invited me to this really nice restaurant for dinner. I got us a table, but Vinny canceled on me at the last minute. I had already gotten a table, so I decided to just eat dinner by myself. Right after my food arrived, I noticed that there was a man sitting at a table across from me. He was blonde and handsome, and the only other person eating alone. I caught him staring at me a couple times, but I didn't think anything of it. I figured he'd wanted to come over and ask me out, but he didn't have the nerve. After I finished my food, I paid the bill and left. As I was leaving the restaurant, I noticed that the blonde man was leaving too. He was walking fast, as if he wanted to catch up to me. I got a bad feeling about him and hurried to my car before he could reach me. As I drove away, I saw him standing in the middle of the parking lot, staring at me. He wrote something down on a piece of paper. I didn't realize until later that he was writing my license plate number. After that, I started noticing the blonde man more and more. I saw him in the park while I was jogging. I saw him hanging outside the theater after Vinny took me to see a movie. I even saw him waiting outside my office when I had to go into work after hours. Each time, he just stared at me with this cold expression. The worst part was that Vinny never seemed to catch a glimpse of him. I tried to tell him that someone was following me, but whenever he looked, the man was gone. I was starting to get really freaked out. Then, one night, I was home alone when Vinny ran into the house in a panic. I tried to ask him what had happened, but he said he didn't have time to explain. He told me that we were in danger. We needed to leave right away. In my heart, I knew that the man had come back. My car was parked on the street behind us, and we had to race through our dark backyard to get to it. We had a lot of trees back there, plenty of places for someone to hide. Vinny looked all around, as if he was expecting someone to jump out. We got to the car, and there was a rustle from the trees behind us. Someone was hiding there. Vinny told me to get into the car. He pulled a gun out of his pocket. I had no idea he even owned a gun. Before I could say anything, he was gone, charging into the trees. I tried to open the car door and realized with horror that Vinny still had the keys. I was alone out there. I tried to see Vinny, but it was too dark. I waited. Then I heard two voices, Vinny's and another man's. It had to be my stalker. They were shouting at each other, but I couldn't make out the words. I heard a struggle, and then a single gunshot. I waited, my heart racing, and then slowly, that blonde man walked out of the trees. I screamed and started to run away. "Wait!" he called after me. I kept going, and he raced after me. Soon, he caught up and grabbed me from behind. I fell to the ground, and that man held me in place. I knew he was going to kill me, just like he'd killed my boyfriend. I screamed for help, and he said, "Please, let me explain." His voice was calm and sympathetic, so I stopped screaming. He explained that he was with the FBI, and he'd been trailing my boyfriend for months. Vinny was a hitman for one of the most dangerous crime families in the country. He'd finally realized that the FBI was on his tail, so he was trying to flee with me as a hostage. If this man hadn't stopped him, I would have been kidnapped by my own boyfriend. I'm in witness protection now, trying to restart my life. It's been tough, but at least I'm safe, and it's all thanks to the man I thought was my stalker.